Hi guys, welcome back. In today's episode, I'll show you the functionalities behind the already created GUI. Previously, I showed you how to create a TKINTER GUI and a database that we will connect to today. If you haven't seen the videos, you can check on the links below. You will see how to download and install MYSQL, which is the data interface for managing our data. You'll also see the link to show you how to create MySQL DB and Python TKINTER GUI to change password. Lastly, you're going to find the part 2 of the previous video. Please sit, relax, and enjoy this version. Okay, so now let us go to what we have for today. So before we start, I want us to insert more values into our database table. Okay, so that we'll have more data on our table, and at least we can change maybe about 2 or 3 password on our database. Okay, so now how do we insert our data? Previously I showed you how to do that, but we can still do it again. You can start by using the query insert into the name of the table. The name of our table is change underscore password. Okay, then the values. Okay, and then we will use our parentheses. Okay, so inside our parentheses, we're going to insert our data. So first of all, we have our first name, which is a string. Okay, collection of strings there. So now the first name, we can decide to say Jamie. Okay, so Jamie. And then for the second name or the last name, we can say Hendricks. Okay, Jamie Hendricks. Okay, and the last one and the next one is gender. Okay, so Hendricks is a male. And password for Hendricks. So Hendricks could decide to use Hendricks for his password. And to confirm that, we have to still use Hendricks. Okay, and the timestamp is now. So it's just going to include the timestamp when the data was entered. So now I'm simply going to hit on my enter key for this to be inserted into my table. All right, so that has been changed. Okay, so now we can check if truly this has been inserted into our table. So how do we do that? We select all from the table. Okay, so we'll say select all. So that star actually means to pick every data from that table, the rows and the columns actually. Okay, so now we're going to select all from the name of the table, which is change P. Okay, okay, and then we simply hit enter. All right, so now we have Jamie. So this has been included here. Okay, so let's try the last one. So for the last one, we're simply going to insert into change P the values, and then for the first name, we're going to say Brenda. Oh, or Brenda. All right, so that's still a name. And the second one, the last name, we're going to use Inky. Inky. Brenda Inky. And she is a female. And her password could be Inky. Let's use that. And to confirm that, we can just still use our Inky. And lastly is the time. So we're just going to say now. Okay, then we hit our enter key. So that has been entered. So to get all of the data from this table, we're simply going to do the same thing from change key. All right, so now we have a collection of 3 names and all of the data. Okay, so after this, we can now work on the functionalities and try to retrieve our name and change our password from our GUI. All right, so now let's connect our GUI to the database. So now we're here. Let's just start by connecting our GUI to the database. Okay, so for this first stage of this GUI functionality is to ensure that all entry fields are not empty. If it is empty, then we'll get an error message, okay, indicating all entry fields must be entered. Then we'll have a return loop, okay, so that should so that is it. And if all that is false, then we'll proceed to the next stage, which is where we're going to use our if and elif loop. All right. Okay, so now let's go down to our submit button. So our submit button is where we want all of the functions to happen. Here is our submit button. So we're simply going to include a command here. I'm just going to say command, and the name of our command is going to be, okay, so let me zoom that so you can see this properly. All right, so now I'm going to just say submit. That isn't clear. Okay, so we have here submit. Okay, so now we have that. We can go to the top of the screen, here, and then define our command. We'll simply say submit parentheses, then with that. So like I said, for this first stage of the GUI, we're going to include our entry fields and ensure that they are not empty. All right, so that's going to be the first code for this first stage. So here I'm going to simply say if, okay, now we'll include our entry field. So our first entry field is name entry. Okay, so now I'm going to say name entry dot get. All right, so whatever is imputed into that is going to take it. All right, so if that name entry dot get is empty, okay, or the next entry field is our password entry, or password entry dot get. If that is equivalent to an empty, or the last one is our confirm password, or confirm password entry dot get. Okay, so if that is equivalent to an empty string, we're simply going to get a message. Okay, so we're going to get a message box. So now we're having our error here because we have not imported our message box. So now I'm going to import my message, say from TKINTER import message box, and then this error goes away. Okay, so here this code means that if name entry.get is empty, if any of these entries are empty, then we should get an error message box, okay, telling us that there's an error. And the error message is going to be or entry fields must be entered. Okay, so that is it. So after that, we're going to get a return function. So you should go back and ensure that all of the entry fields are entered. Okay, so let's run this. Right, so let's see. So let me assume I skipped the name and I go straight to password and I say Hendrix. And the next is Hendrix as well. So I'm just going to, all right, so that is working perfectly fine. All entry fields must be entered. Okay, so that is working. But let's assume the name is Hendrix here, and I include and I just submit. Nothing is going to happen because I've not given a function to this stage. Okay, so that is what we're going to be doing next. Okay, for the next one now is for password confirmation. So we have to ensure that the password entry and the confirm password entry are equal. They must be the same. Okay, so that's where we come in with the elif. Else, if our password entry, the get, is not equal to our confirm password entry.get. Whatever it gets here has to be equivalent to the next one. Then we're simply going to get the message box showing an error. And the error is going to be passwords do not match. So that is it. All right, so let's run this. Okay, still going to use a return value here. Okay, so if that do not match, you have to return back to ensure that these two entry fields are the same values imputed into them. All right, so let's run this. Okay, so let me say Hendrix. And here I could say N, and here I could say Henny. And then I submit. All right, so our password do not match here. Okay, so that is just it. So that is working perfectly fine. Our confirmation is correct here. So let's say we have Henny here. Okay, so now for the next one, we have not given a function to the next stage. So this first stage is done. So if all of these are being entered correctly, then we should proceed to the next stage, which is where we will have to connect to our database. First of all, we will have to call out our database. We say db equals MySQL. So there will be an error here because we have not imported MySQL. So I'm simply going to import MySQL here. MySQL. I'm having an error here. MySQL. So I'm just going to set it here. And I click on this place and I just say MySQL. And then I'm just going to hit my enter. So I'm going to install that package. So this is just going to take a while. You just ensure you exercise some patience. All right, so that has been installed. Go back to what we have to do. Okay, that's to do. Okay, so now the error is gone. We have simply imported our MySQL. So after that, we should be connecting to our database. All right. Okay, so after that, we are okay. So after your installation, your MySQL installation. So you're going to include your host name and your username and the password and then the name of the database in this section in order for this to connect. So first of all, you have to start with the host. And the host name is the local host. Okay? And then we have our user. Okay? So the user is root. That's what I use for mine. And then we're going to have a password. And the password I use is just 123. Okay. And then name of the database. Okay. So let's go back to the database that we are making use of. So the name of our database here is change password. Okay, so that's what we're going to use. Ensure that you input the correct name. Do not forget the underscore so that we do not have error at the end. Okay, so now we're making use of this. Okay, so let's put that down. So this is going to be change underscore password. All right, so that is it for imputing our database connection here. So after this part, we would have to include our cursor here. So this is where our cursor will connect this. Okay, so we're just going to use the name of the database here. We're simply going to say db.cursor. Okay, so we'll have to put this in a variable that we would be using along the line. Okay, so that is just it for this. So after this stage, we're going to now query our database to perform some things for us. So now we'll have to select from the database table. Okay, previously we created a table that the table here, and the name of our table here is change p. Okay, so that's what we're going to use. So the next stage is to query the database to select everything from that table, okay, where we are locating a particular entry field. So I'm simply going to say query, okay, select, I don't have to make this, well, depends. Okay, select all, like I said, the star means all, from the name of the table, which is change p, where our first name is located. Okay, so this simply means whatever is being entered. Okay, it does not have a specific data, a specific value. So whatever value is being entered here is going to check or select from this first name. Okay, so after this we'll have to execute this code. This is where we would have to use our cursor again, dot execute. Okay, and then we will have to call our query because this is the line we want to execute. So we're going to call a query and the entry field that we want to execute. So our entry field is the name entry. So this is where it's going to search from. It's going to go to the first name. Okay. It's going to go to, sorry. Okay. So here it's going to select all from this first name. Okay. So that's what we're working with now. So select all from first name that gets. Okay. And after that, this is what it's going to do. It's going to, for the next stage, we're going to fetch the existing name. So whatever name you enter into the GUI, it's going to select, go to search for that name on the table, from the table, which is our change p, and confirm if that name truly exists. So now we're going to run a code that would fetch for that already name to check if that name does exist on that table. Okay, so this is what we're going to do now for the next stage. So we're simply going to say call our cursor dot fetch one. It's just one name we're looking for. Okay, so let me just comment this so that you do not forget. So this line of code is to fetch for an existing data, and then I'm going to put this to a variable that I'm going to be working with later on. Okay, Alright, so after the stage, we're simply going to check if this name does not exist, then we should get a message telling us that it does not exist. So this is where we're going to use our if loop. So if data is equals to none, if it does not exist, then we should get a message box error, message box, okay, giving us an error that the name does not exist. Okay, all right. So after this stage, if truly this has worked this way, then we have to go to the next stage. Okay, so this is where we're going to include our else. So if truly all these are false, then we should go to the next stage, else query, which we have used already. So our query is going to update the table. So update the name of the table, which is change p, and set that table, set a particular field. So we're setting our password now equals our %. Okay, so now we'll go to the next stage. So after we have set this password, okay, where our first name is equals to this. So whatever password and whatever name you have entered here is simply just going to search for it and change the thing and change the password here. Okay, so this is basically to update your password. So it's going to search for the first name. Once you input your first name, it will look for it on the name field, for the first name field, and then go to the password field of this first name and simply change the password there. All right, so that's what this query is about. So after this, we have to execute this code. This is where we're going to use our cursor.execute. Okay, and this is going to call the field we would be working with. So we're going to simply say query, and the fields we're going to be working with is our password entry, field dot get. Okay, and then we're going to have our name entry field dot get. So these are the two fields that we would be working with. So after this is done, okay, so after this is done, we're going to commit this. We're going to commit this. So this is basically updating. So this line of code is going to help us to update this query. So I'm going to call the name of my database, which is DB, and then to commit this. So this line is simply going to update this code. And after this update, we're going to close the operation when we're done. So after we're done with this, the next thing we should get is a message telling us that this operation was successful or is successful. Okay, so here, let me just make this simple for you. So this line of code is to update, is for update, and this one is to close. Okay, so for the next one is to give us the message. So we're going to use our message box showing info that this line of code was successful, or rather our database was updated successfully. So I'm just going to simply say successful changes. Okay, so as simple as that. All right, so for the next thing, I think there seems to be an error somewhere. It's over here. Okay, let's see what this is about. Okay, so now let's run this to know where the error is coming from. We can see our red errors over here. So let's run this and see where it's coming from. Okay, so it says on our else, which is okay on line 29. All right, so here it is. Okay, so the issue here is that our else isn't falling in line with our if because they're supposed to go hand in hand. Okay, so if this is not this, then else this should work. So this is supposed to go with this and it's not in line with this first code. So both of them have to be on the same line here. So I simply just use my space bar and placed it on the same indentation with our if here. Okay, so now this error is gone. Let us run our code and see. All right, so that is simply working. All right, so now what we're going to do is to test all this we have done here so far. Okay, so let me put this right and let's run this. Okay, first of all, what did we say? What did we do here? So we I have connected to our database here. Okay, so the next thing is to check for the error, to check if a certain name does not exist. Now I showed you from the previous database we created here. Okay, so we have Monica, Jamie, and Brenda. So this is what we're going to do. If I use a different name that does not exist on this database, I'm simply going to get a message over here that the name does not exist. Okay, so let's try that. Okay, all right, so let's try that. Let's just use a random name. Okay, so let me just say I'm just going to use my own name. I'm just going to say Steph. Okay, and I'm just going to try a password like this, Steph as well, and then say Steph. So let me turn it down. Okay, now you can see this name does not exist on this database. So now if I use one of these names that are existing on this database, if I use it here, then I can be able to change the password. Okay, so now let me erase this. Okay, so let me try by using Branda. So this is Branda. Okay, Branda, and I want a password for, say, Benny. And to confirm that password, I have to repeat the same password and submit this to the database. So now we have gotten our changes here. So remember we wrote a code here that says if this thing is successful, if we check that this thing is successful, then you should simply update our database, which is this query we have here. Update the changes and set the password that I've put in the place where that name is found. So that's basically what we did, and we imputed the name, and what it did was to go search for that name and search for the password field where that name exists and change the password. So initially here we have Inky. So now we have changed the password to Benny. So let's confirm that in our database. Okay, so I'm going to say select or from change P, which is the name of the table, and then I hit enter. Okay, so now you can see that the password has been changed. So initially we were having Inky and the password, and now the name Branda, the password has been changed to Benny, which we just did over here. All right, so it's just as simple as that. Okay, so let's try another one. So another one here is let's try Jamie. Okay, all right, so Jamie password here is Hendrix. Okay, so we can change it to some other thing. All right, so let me erase this out, this as well, and this as well. So I'm going to use the name. Okay, so we can see this clearly. So I'm going to use the name Jamie. Then the password, I'm going to say James. And to confirm that, James as well. All right, so this has been changed. So let's run this over here and see. and hit enter key. All right, so now initially James had a password Hendrix. Now he's using a new password James. So this is just as simple as this. Okay, so another thing, this is the last stage for this. Another thing now, if you see here, when we're done with what we're doing, everything is successful, we still have an issue here. Our name and password is still going to be lingering on this entry fields, of which we don't want that to happen. So we want a situation where when we're done, we get a message that is successful and then our entry field is cleared off, so that some other person or some other user does not come and take note of our name and our password and possibly make use of it for some other thing. Okay, so in order to avoid that, we'll have to go back to our code and change that. So this is what we're going to do. We're simply going to call all the names of our entry field and delete everything from the beginning to the end when we are done with our changes. Okay, so now we're simply going to say our first entry field is the name entry field. Now we're going to use delete. Okay, and where we want this to delete, it has to start from 0, which is from the beginning here to the end, and we have to include that to the end. Okay, so that is for our name entry field. Now the next one is our password entry field. Okay, we're going to include that password entry dot delete. So we're going to use that at end. And lastly is our confirm password entry dot delete. Okay, and this is going to be from 0 to end of the screen. Okay, so now let's run this to confirm that. Okay, so for the next one we're going to use let's try Monica, and Monica is here. Monica is still buried in Monica password, so we can change this to something else. So I'm going to simply put her name down, Monica, and I'm going to say money. Okay, and then the next is still going to be money as well. All right, let's do this. So okay, so let's do that again. So I'm going to say Monica, money, and I'm going to use money as well. Money as well. And submit this to the database. Okay, now to confirm that, we have to select all from the table on display. All right, so Monica here, her password has been changed to money. All right, so you can see the changes has been made here. So after our change is successful, our screen clears immediately. Okay, so that is what this line of code does here for us. You just have to call the name of the entry field and include the deletes. Okay, so that is just how this works. It's just as easy as all of this. So I think we should start from the beginning as well to check again. Okay, so we said if this is empty and if the entry fields are empty, then we should get an error. Okay, so let me just simply click on limit. All right, so this is an error telling us that all our entry fields must be entered. Okay, so for the next stage is if our password.get, if this our two password entry does not match, if this is not equivalent to this, or if this is not equivalent to this, then we are going to get an error message telling us that passwords do not match. Okay, let's try that. So I'm going to say Henry, and I'm just Henry, and I'm just going to use hen, and I'm just enter. Now we get a message, passwords does not match. Okay, all right, so after that we would, okay, there's something here. Okay, then if all of this was false, then it's going to go to the next stage and just connect to our database. So this code line of code is what would connect our data to the database. Okay, so for the next one now, if after it has connected to the database, the next stage is for the query to check if that name that is being entered here exists on the database. If it doesn't, that's where I included if that data is equals to none, then we should get an error telling us that the name does not exist. Else, if it does, then it should update that table by setting the password to whatever is being entered here, where the first name exists. Okay, so after that, it should execute the code. So the entry fields, this is the entry field where it's going to pick the data from. That's why I included them here. And the next thing is to update this database. This is where our commit comes in. It's basically to update, to make changes to whatever has been entered there. So after that process is to close it down, and this is where I included my db.close. So when that is done, we should get a message telling us that that process was successful, and that is where I included our message box, which is going to tell us that the process or we had a successful changes. Okay, all right, so that is just how this worked. All right, so I hope this was properly understood. Okay, so please, if you, okay, sorry, I think I forgot to do this from the beginning. So I actually wanted us to change this name. Okay, so we can change the name to the name of the thing we're working with. So this is change passwords. All right, and refactor. Okay, so now that has been changed here. All right, so now we have come to the end of this process. All right, so I hope this was properly understood. Okay, so I showed you how to create the GUI, and these are the functionalities of the GUI that was created. Okay, so thank you very much for following up to the end of this process, this program. I hope you enjoyed it. Please do not forget to subscribe and like my videos. Subscribe to my channel as well. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you next time for more. Thank you.